Wonderful. Well, if you've been at St Wilfrid's for the past few weeks, you'll know that we've been in a little teaching series that we've called Basics. And I think, actually, it's up on the screen. That, my friends, is when the vicar's the chief graphic designer. That is just written into notes on the iPhone and screenshotted. But it looks kind of cool. And Justin Bieber did it for a whole album. So there we go. That was a joke. Okay, so we've been in this series called Basics, and the idea of this teaching series has been, funnily enough, to get back to the basics of why we're here as a church. You know, so often we can go through the motions in life, can't we? We often don't stop to ask ourselves, why are we here? Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we rock up for this hour and a half on a Sunday morning as opposed to staying in bed with a bacon sandwich? Some of you are like, I wouldn't mind that right now. Maybe we can do both. That's great. Maybe we'll look into that. But we've been looking into that, and so we've been looking, and the reason, by the way, we said this every week, the reason, spoiler alert, is God. That's why we're here. We're here for God, but that's quite big, right? So we've been breaking it down into different chunks, and we've looked at prayer. We've looked at the role of worship in our lives. We've looked last week at mission. And today I want to look at the subject of friendship. Friendship. There's an old Jewish story. I don't know how au fait you guys are with your rabbinical tales. No, me neither. But there's an old Jewish story called The Legend of the Two Brothers. And the story goes like this, that there were two brothers, one married with many children and the other one single and unmarried. And they both farmed the same land. And, God blessed the crop, and they were both very, very fruitful. And they had to make storehouses to contain all of the wheat that they had harvested. One night, the brother who was single wakes up in the middle of the night, and he thinks to himself, look, my brother, he's married, and he's got children, he's got mouths to feed, and surely God has blessed me with more than I need. So he takes some of the grain out of his barn, fills up a container, and in the middle of the night goes over to his brother's barn and puts the grain there. But little did he know that the married brother with the wife and kids woke up in the middle of the night and said, when I'm old, I've got my kids and my wife to look after me, and my brother, he'll only have what he's saved up. And so he fills up a container full of his seed in his barn, and he goes to his brother's barn and fills it up. And this goes on night after night and week after week. And neither of the brothers can figure out why their stock isn't getting any smaller. Until one night, in the middle of the night, the two brothers, as they're doing this, bump into one another. And they suddenly dawns on them what they've each been doing for the other. And it says, in the Jewish story that they embrace. And there's this moment of brotherly love, which I love this. It says in the original story, which lit up the mountainside. And the legend goes that when God saw this display of brotherly love, he chose that place to be where he built the temple. Isn't that beautiful? And that's a story that's been told in Jewish circles for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the story tells us a few things. A beautiful story on so many levels. But one of the things it tells us is this. There is a beauty to kinship, isn't there? The beauty of friendship. In this case, it was brotherly love. But the beauty of loving relationship still moves us. And it not only moves us, but in this story, it even moves the heart of God. Interestingly, it even tells us something about God's dwelling place, that God's presence dwells, in fact, in relationship. The idea of God putting his temple there, the temple for the Jewish people was the place of God's presence. That's where God dwelt. And so God chooses to build his temple on the foundation of the relationship of these two brothers. God's dwelling place is in relationship. But more than that, God in of himself is a relationship. Anyone ready for a little bit of theology this morning? Woo! Come on, bit of Trinitarian theology. Here we go. 101. God in himself is relationship. We worship God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The three in one, the triune God. That God in of himself, before anything was created, before the universe was created, when God was just God, before Genesis 1, he is in relationship. The Trinity is in relationship. And the idea, I love this, a theologian called Robert Jensen said that it's a relationship of love between the three of them. And that Jesus is always saying to the Father, Father, I love you, I love you, I love you. And the Father's always saying to the Son, I love you, I love you, I love you. And the Spirit is always saying to the Father and the Son, I love you and love you. And the Father's saying to the Spirit, I love you. And the Son's saying to the Spirit, I love you. And the Son's saying to the Spirit and the Father, I love you. It's amazing. And out of this relationship of love that is at the core of who God is, he creates the universe. God is, in of himself, relationship. And this is at the heart of Christian doctrine. You know, lest we think that relationship and friendship is just an idea we've come up with. No. God is relationship. Some theologians call it God is a divine dance that is constantly creating. I love that. And so God is a relationship, and yet he creates us and designs us to be in relationship with him, to be in friendship with him. And now in his church, he empowers us to be in relationship with him and one another as his church. Right, so we've done a little bit of Theology 101. Anyone ready for a little bit of quantum physics? Great, here we go. Quantum Physics 101. The Italian theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli says this. This is amazing. He talks about in his book, 7 Brief Lessons on Physics, that some of the most elemental principles in the universe, the smallest elements that underpin whole fields of science, that underpin whole technologies, when we observe them in of themselves, are you ready for this? We can't actually describe what they are. When we look at something in of itself, we can't explain how it works, we can't describe what it is, but we can only explain them and describe them in relationship to other things. This is a scientific truth that underpins so much of physics. And it leads him to say this, Carlo Rovelli, this physicist who, as far as I know, doesn't have a faith. He says, is it possible, as it seems to me it is, that reality is only interaction? Let me put this another way. Is it possible that all of life, down to the smallest atom, down to the smallest scientific element, is relationship? Wow. Doesn't that make sense? If God's made it and he's in relationship, all of life is relationship. And as human beings, the ultimate relationship we're made for is relationship with God. That we're designed to be in relationship with God. That, as Augustine puts it, our hearts will find no rest until we rest in him. You know, maybe even you're here today and you feel a sense of that. Maybe life's going well, maybe it's not going so well, but you just know, even over the years, that you've tried different things, but there's still this hole in the core of your being. There's something that just doesn't get filled up. Because that's for God. That space is God. You will not find rest until you rest in the person of Jesus, who loves you and knows you and is calling you by name. And so we're made for a relationship with God. It makes sense then, doesn't it? Hopefully I've made my point that relationship, friendship, God takes very seriously. Very seriously. This is the raw material of his kingdom. He puts out a few scriptures just to demonstrate this point. Exodus 33, verse 11. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Proverbs 27:9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. Psalm 133:1. This is a famous one. Behold, how good and pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. Romans 12, verse 10. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. And of course, the kingpin, the pinnacle, I would say, of all verses on friendship, this one from John 13. A new command I give you. This is what Anne read to us, right? Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. You know, this one is so mind-blowing. Let me just take a couple of moments on this. Love one another as I have loved you. So Jesus' standard for our love for each other is his love for us. His love that leads him to the cross. His love that's always more willing to listen to us than we are to pray. His love that gives everything to us, that is generous towards us in every moment. And then he says, I mean, this just completely blows my mind. He says, by this, if you do this, if you love one another as I've loved you, this is how the world will know that you're my disciples. Are you listening to me this morning? This is how the world will know you're... Jesus doesn't say, the way that Wilford Parish will know that you're my disciples is you're going to have the best coffee in town. God bless coffee. He doesn't say that the way that Wilford Parish is going to know that you're my disciples is you're going to have the best youth work. Although that'd be amazing. It's not even, I hate to say, it's not even that you're going to have the best vicar. Some of you are like, that's true. It's not even that you're going to have the most charismatic worship leader. All that stuff is his place. No. Jesus says this. When Jesus gives a bit of advice on evangelism, what does he say? The way that the world will know you is by your love for one another. What an incentive to love, folks. What an incentive to love. Is it possible that the thing that will draw people into this community in the months and years to come isn't our eloquence? I mean, St. Paul says, he said, I didn't come to you with wise words or words of eloquence. I came just to preach Christ and him crucified. Is it possible in these months and years to come, the thing that will draw people into this community, that ultimately will draw them into relationship with Jesus, isn't our wise words, it's not even our good sermons, it will be our love for one another. That when people outside of this church look at this church, they think, wow, that love is supernatural. There can be no explanation for that love unless Jesus is indeed raised from the tomb. That'd be good, wouldn't it? And let me say this now. This mandate from Jesus to love one another as he has loved us. Big churches are no guarantee that this will happen. Big successful churches doesn't mean that they've grasped it. They may do, but I'm just saying it's not a guarantee. But let me say this as well. Small churches does not guarantee that we're loving. Neither's a guarantee. This isn't something that happens by accident, folks. This is something that we have to step into. This is what happens when we draw near to God, when we prioritize the presence of God. And I'll tell you why that happens, because when we're filled with the life and the love of Jesus, we can't help but see with his eyes as he sees other people. You know, Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, says, I love communion because communion is the time every week where I see other people properly. I see people not through my own eyes, but I see people, even if they're a stranger, even if there's someone who annoys me, I see them through the eyes of Jesus as one that Jesus has died for, as one that Jesus loves with an everlasting love, not through the eyes of my own issues or baggage. And Jesus demonstrates the importance of friendship himself, doesn't he? You know, Jesus has got his public ministry. He's got his, if you like, his gathered, the 72 disciples. We read about this in Luke 10. You know, that he sends out. He has his kind of, if you like, Sunday morning crowd. But then Mark 3, we know that Jesus spends his whole ministry also with a smaller group, right? With 12 disciples, 12 friends that he takes on this journey with him. And even within that, Jesus has an even smaller group of Peter, James, and John, of the really close friends that he takes with him on some of the special moments, particularly Mark 9, the Mount of Transfiguration. So what, though? Great, Italian physicists, doctrine of the Trinity, John 13, Jesus' friendships. What does it all mean for us here and now? I think it means a few things. But first, I'd love to say this. We cannot do the journey of faith alone. We can't get there alone. The life of following Jesus is not a lone wolf activity. We need each other. It's not just an added extra. Listen, we need each other. We can't get there alone. Even Jesus, the Messiah, God in flesh, King of kings, Lord of lords, draws 12 disciples around him. That should give us pause to think. We can't do faith alone. We need one another in our following of Jesus. And this means that we have to make, as a church, friendship a priority. You know, it's already happening in many ways. I'm not saying we're not doing that, but I feel challenged of the kind of friendship that Jesus calls me to. Am I investing in that kind of friendship? Or am I investing in more acquaintances, like the kind I might have on social media? And we do this in so many ways. Like I say, there's already beautiful friendships in this community. People have been journeying together with each other longer than I've been alive. It's amazing. But there's always more. There's always more for us to lean into in this area. And so the rest of this sermon, I'm going to invite a couple of friends, a couple of people to share some stories about how friendship has outworked in their faith with Jesus. You know, looking at the power of friendship and then looking at what it would mean for us to live in intentional friendships where the aim is for us to grow closer to Jesus together. So first up, ladies and gentlemen, I want to invite our church warden, Eddie Mason, to come and join me. I'll grab a mic for him. Come on, let's give him a clap, shall we? And the yeah, it's on, I think. Is it on?
Yep.
Check.
By the way, before he says anything, he dropped me in this yesterday.
Eddie said, all I ask you to do, George, is send me the questions ahead of time. Did you get any questions?
No.
No. Hold on, I'll hold my hands up to that one. But one of the reasons I want you to speak, Eddie, is because I remember early on at St Wilfrid's, you shared with me the story of how you began your journey into church and into faith in your 40s. And you know, I don't want to exaggerate or sort of summarize it too much, but essentially it was friendship, wasn't it, that led you into faith? And
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
By the way, I'm only 52 now, so it's but basically, around about 20 years ago, when I started looking for a purpose, what life was about, really, and I got involved there, and I'd got not a great deal to do. I was self-employed, and I've got my own time, really. So I ended up at the Holiday Club. Quite a few of you will probably know about the Holiday Club, where there was about 300 kids, and they all knew more about Jesus and God than I did, which was quite embarrassing, really. So I kept away from them and just started talking to one or two of the adults. But basically, I started to explore, and then there was about 5 of us that I got involved with, and Lindsay, I think you're there, Lindsay, aren't you? Yeah, she'll know us as a grumpy old men, really. Yeah, shaking her head. So, but the grumpy old man was a vicar, a head teacher, a marketing executive, an engineer, and an agnostic, which was me. So, not to be too enthusiastic about where George is going with it, it could take me ages to do this, but I'll do it very quickly. Basically, the friendship part of it, I was able to explore with those people what life was about and the purpose of my life and who was more important in it. And gradually, over a period of time, there was no great flash of lightning or anything. It took a little while to realize that the thing for me was God, and he was the main purpose in life, and the way to God was through Jesus. And the only way I could do that, really, was through this friendship of these people. And it was, it endures today. So that is my bit about the importance of friendship. Not quite as enthusiastic as George, and very grumpy. And by the way, we all aspired to be grumpy. By the way, it was not. We weren't naturally grumpy.
You let into it, yeah.
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah.
It's good.
I
think you're allowed to, aren't you?
Yeah. You are at my age. Yeah.
Oh, Eddie, that's amazing. Can we just thank Eddie? That's just stunning, isn't it? Thank you, brother. But isn't that amazing? Just the simple power of friendship. The simple power of friendship, a group of friends that revealed Jesus, that step by step took Eddie on a journey together. And that's amazing. And that story, by the way, I know just isn't necessarily unique. But I want to say this is part of the reason why we're doing this thing, this fire pit thing every week as well, is because we want it to be open to anyone in our community to come. We want to offer simple friendship. And we want people to encounter the love of God. We do, just through the simple things of friendship. It's one of the things that also has been done in holiday time, I know, with the Stay and Play that Melissa Baker and others of you have run. That thing of helping, welcoming people in through the simplicity of friendship. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so that's one way that we look at it. And we have spaces for gathering, don't we? We have these kind of spaces on Sundays where many of us can gather together. And it's not always possible to know everyone equally in these spaces. We have other spaces like I said, Fire Pit Thursdays, or the worship and prayer on Wednesdays, where again it's maybe a slightly smaller group, but still quite a big group to be able to get to know everyone deeply. And I guess what I want to talk to us about today and invite us into today really to engage with is this idea of, use whatever language you want. I've just called it for the sake of the sermon, intentional friendship. And these are friendships that are in groups that are perhaps smaller, and there's good reason for that. So, we've done Trinitarian theology, we've done quantum physics. Everyone ready for a bit of sociology now? Everyone's like, oh no, not sociology as well. I promise I'll be quick. But there's a branch of sociology you may have heard of called proxemics. And this branch of sociology is all about the study of space and why we connect with people differently depending on the number of people in the room and the space that we have between them. And these scientists, I think sociologists are scientists, aren't they? Human sciences. They say that there are 4 main spaces that life is divided into. The public space, which perhaps is more like this. The social space, which perhaps is more like a Fire Pit Thursday, or which they reckon is between sort of 15 and 25, or perhaps our worship and prayer evenings. And the personal space, which usually they think is groups between 2 and 6. And it's often said that it's in the personal space that we're actually able to share vulnerably, that we feel safe and we can learn to trust others and build friendships where we can share about our lives. And I want to suggest to us today that these spaces also work best for friendships where we want to grow closer to Jesus together. Because it's the kind of spaces where it's not too big, it's not too small. We can learn to trust one another. We can engage in deep friendships and step by step begin to open up the real stuff of our lives, what we really need prayer for, what we're really struggling with, what we're really loving, and grow closer to Jesus together. I've just got to say right now, put my hands in the air. This has been so fruitful for me since I became a Christian. These groups, these smaller groups, I think every church has had a different name for them. Some people call them huddles. Some people call them fuse. Some people call them groups. There you go. But they've been so foundational for me to get together with just a few other people, usually a group of men, and to dig deep into the Bible together, to pray for one another, to share the real stuff in life together. It's been transformative to me. And so we need these spaces. And I also want to say that one of the things that these spaces do as well, and, you know, feel free, you may well disagree with this, but in my experience, I found this to be true. Most things in life that people think that they need a pastor or a clergy person for can actually be worked out in deep friendship. And I say that, I'm not saying that to sort of diminish my workload. Sounds like, I'm saying it because it's true, and it's actually what's going to be best for each one of us. Most things that we think we need a pastor for can be worked out in deep friendship. Not everything, but most things. And actually most of us, and I would include myself in this over the years, have just struggled to create deep friendships where I was really committing to others and where I could really let myself be known and loved and love other people. And so that's another reason why I want to invite us into doing this. But rather than just keeping going on, I thought we'll have another couple of stories from people, and I've invited Mick and Marion to come and share, because part of their faith journey has been in a friendship like this with another couple. So do you guys want to come up, and should we give them a clap again as they come up, just to share a little bit? There you go.
Changes me through that.
Stand at the other end. So this whole idea of friendships where we learn to sort of grow in love for Jesus together, friendships where we go sort of deep together and learn to follow Jesus together. You've experienced some of this in your life.
A bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. And can you just tell us a little bit about that?
It does work. Yes, like Eddie has said, we've been connected with this church and one other one, besides this one, and not many people know in this church, over 40 years. And in that 40 years, we've been nurtured, encouraged, and loved. And I found the biggest thing as a Christian is love. And, all the own groups we've been to, the sing-alongs we've been to, when people are down or they want encouraging, supporting, we've been there. And it always reminds me when we first moved into Hannah Crescent over 40 years ago. In them days we were a lot younger, and people were having garages built and bases put down. And we sat in our house, and across the road this big lorry concrete lorry. All this concrete was piled up and it shut off. There was one guy with a shovel. You think, if we don't get that done quick, that's going to go off. So next thing you know, half a dozen men all come out of the houses with shovels. And we all shoveled it and laid it and, flattened it off. And that to me is love. That's thinking of other people, being there for them. And I think that's so important. And I can go on for hours, and I'm sure a lot of people here also could. But the church has been our main life. And when we first came here, we met people that nurtured us, encouraged us, loved us. And I like to think we've carried that on over the last 40-odd years. And hopefully still do. And so, yeah, that's great.
So talk to us, because I know one of those couples in particular, it's Jill and David, isn't it?
It
that had a
is.
big effect on you. And
Yeah,
talk
they
to us
did.
what about that friendship and how that friendship sort of helped you in your relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I think really they nurtured us.
Yes.
We were new here all these 42 years ago. And I also remember they sat on the back pew of the first of this front section, and they'd always got good smiles. And then we went for coffee, and they'd come and chat with us. And gradually, friendship developed, and they invited us to go for a meal at their home. So off we went, had a good time. Found that we got loads of things in common. They had 2 children, we had 2 children. Theirs was slightly older than ours. Sorry?
Sorry, I'm going to say we did a lot of caravanning and
Yeah, we did.
things together.
But amongst all this as well, at that time we had a women's fellowship group, and Jill was one of the organisers of this. She ran it, and it was through this, going to this ladies' fellowship group, that I came to know the Lord, and well, it was the best thing that happened.
It's amazing.
Mick wasn't far behind me.
She got me in tow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
From there, our relationship blossomed and blossomed. We went on numerous holidays, both in this country and abroad.
And on one of the holidays, on one of the holidays, you ended up just getting baptised.
We did.
Is that
We
right?
did. We went to Wales. We went to Abersoch, and it was a beautiful day, nice calm sea, and we so believed that we should have total immersion. And so Dave, being church warden at the time, he baptised each one of us, Mick and I, and his wife Jill, and their son Matthew. And then we, between us, baptised him.
Yeah.
So
Oh, it's beautiful. And it's such a beautiful story of friendship over all those years as well, of
Yes.
journeying together in faith. And
yeah.
I love it. I think Eddie's open for bookings for baptisms in the Trent as well. So,
Oh, right.
Can we thank these guys?
Okay,
Thanks so much. Wonderful. Finally, Freya, would you like to come up? I just had a couple of questions for you as well. Welcome Freya up, everyone. That'd be great. So Freya, we've talked loads about friendship, why it's important, this whole thing of intentional friendship, and even particularly in sort of smaller groups of people. You might have said all this to people, like, what does this actually look like? Like, how would you actually start this? What do you do to make this happen? Talk to us a little bit, because you're in a group like this. What do you do when you get together? How does this happen sort of in reality?
So, we call it a few.
Yeah.
Our few started in lockdown. I'd been in one before, and we'd never actually got to meet up. We were all on very different schedules, different jobs, and we could just never find a time. So it came to a point where we're like, this isn't working, let's look for a different few. And from there, I found my current few. We were kind of friends of friends, we knew each other, but made the decision to be in a few together. And that started off on FaceTime over lockdown, and then reached the point where we could meet up in person. And we took a bit of time really just to get to know each other to start off with, shared our stories, our testimonies, built a friendship. And from there, we would meet up maybe weekly, maybe monthly, depending on the season we were in. We'd pray for each other. That was the main thing. And that's what I found most important, to just have those two people there who, whatever's happening, wherever I am in my faith or with work or family or life, I know I have those two people there who will pray for me. Whatever's going on for them, they will drop everything and pray for me. And, you know, we've been through marriage, birth, death in this group, and it has been so important to have that consistent couple of people who aren't walking away, aren't looking for other people, who are there for me, I'm there for them, and we will pray together. And it's looked different through different points in the year. Sometimes we've dipped into the Bible together, and that's what we've really wanted to do. Sometimes we've just wanted to go for food and hang out and be with each other's families, but prayer's been the main thing and the consistent thing, and that's been the most important thing, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so I was going to ask you sort of what difference it's made in terms of your own personal faith. You shared some of that, but what difference has it made? I mean, in terms of, because presumably at some point you weren't doing something like this and you started doing it. What's been the main difference for you in your own faith?
I think I've always had those close friends in my life, but you go through different points. They've moved away to different places. We don't live in the same place. And I really wanted to have those people where I live, in my community, part of my church, who I knew were journeying through faith with me. And it's just been a real encouragement in my faith. I mean, before I was within my few, I was more isolated. I didn't have those people I was regularly connecting with. I knew some people. I could go and find someone if I needed prayer at church. I could maybe send a message and reach out to someone, but I didn't have those people who knew me and who knew what I was going through, who knew what I wanted to grow in, who knew where I needed to be challenged. And actually having those people who really know me has meant that my faith has become more real. It has become something we share, something we are hoping for the best for one another in. We are hoping to see each other grow, and we are there to challenge each other sometimes. We are there to say, hey, it's okay that happened. How can we move forward? And that's, it's helped my faith become more real and become more authentic and in the moment, and actually those things I want to grow in or see happen in my life aren't far off anymore. They are named and they are shared, and they're things that we're hoping for together.
That's amazing. Oh, can we thank Freya, folks? Thank you so much. Thanks, Freya. Just such amazing stories, simple stories of friendship. But I guess the point of all this is that, if you're here and you're longing to grow deeper in your faith, you're longing to grow closer to Jesus, you're wanting to follow Jesus more, I want to suggest to you that one of the ways that we have to do that is with other people. We have to go deeper in friendship with other people. And this church, these people around you, are your greatest resource. And so you may already be in something like this. If you are, that's amazing. God bless it. I pray it would flourish. But if you're not, why not take a look around people in this church, perhaps when we get coffee later on, and think, who could I get beside? Who could I join with in growing closer to Jesus together? It won't come overnight, will it? You won't going to be best friends instantly. But it grows, and it grows. And that's been my experience as well.